Howdy, all. Busy night in the world of hockey. I can't even talk straight right now. But I wanted to touch on something we talked about yesterday at the beginning of the show, Russ. Three players named to the Baseball Hall of Fame. One I completely agree with, Tim Raines. I think, to my mind, the second best leadoff hitter in the history of baseball behind Rickey Henderson. It was long overdue. This was his last year of being able to get into the Hall of Fame, and he did. Jeff Bagwell, who I put in sort of the Mike Piazza category, is a guy who was on the periphery of the rumor of steroids, but there was never ever anything proven about him, so they had no case. But Pudge Rodriguez is a steroid guy, and he's
he never got implicated, but there was a dramatic size difference in him from his heyday to the time he got close to hanging it up. Here's what I'll say. We don't know anything about Pudge Rodriguez's steroid use, whether he had any or not. We don't know. But the idea is, I just looked at his numbers, and for a decade, his numbers dropped so drastically from the first part of his career that would make me not put him in. I don't care if he had 311 homers. He had a lot of years of like 14 homers and 50 RBIs. And I got to tell you, I could find a lot of catchers. Ted Simmons was better than that. And so, I'm just saying, it's just that's the part with Pudge Rodriguez that I'm not happy about, is they're going with the first 8 to 10 great years of him. But I'm telling you, his last 8 to 10 were bad.
Right, and you contrast that to somebody like Jorge Posada, who apparently did not get enough votes to be put on a future ballot. So after 1 year, he's done.
Yeah,
you have to get that to, what is it, 10% or 15%?
Yeah, he's in a tough position. Look, as a Met fan, I just happen to wear all my Met stuff today because I'm lazy and I didn't take it off.
Just happened to, Russ.
But as a Met fan, I will say that Posada was a great hitter and he called a good game. Now, he didn't throw out guys and he wasn't the greatest defensive catcher. But I still think at the end of the day, he always came in contrast to Mike Piazza. I think Piazza also called a good game, didn't throw out runners, maybe was a better fielder than Posada, but that's it. I mean, they were very close in that regard. And Posada was a very good clutch hitter, like a great clutch hitter. And sometimes that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but there's enough scars on me to remember how many times this guy came up big when I didn't want him to. And I would put him in. And I don't understand – I wouldn't say first ballot because – and I'm not one of these first ballot guys, but I don't understand how he's just going to fall off the ballot. Like, there's not enough catchers in the Hall of Fame to begin with. It's sort of like goalies in the Hockey Hall of Fame. But Posada's a tough one to sort of leave out. I really think that.
Yeah. And Peter, do you have any thoughts on any of these guys? Or, I mean –
You know what? I'm not a big baseball guy, but I do say that back in the days when the Expos and Blue Jays battled for supremacy in the small landscape of Canadian baseball, I was always an Expos fan. They just seemed a little more fun. Everything was just kind of always stacked against the Expos, and I still feel bad for that fan base in 1994. What happened to them and the way that team was playing. So
I wrote a book, Peter. I should get you a copy. It's called Strike 3. It's on Amazon. I interviewed a lot of Expos. It's something that I felt passionate about because I saw them getting screwed. I saw how Omar Minaya was really handicapped as a GM at the time. I saw that they made him basically trade everybody, Cliff Lee, all of that. We chronicle all that, but I spoke to a lot of guys like the Shields and Cromartie and guys that really were terrific. Now, Tim Raines obviously is a Hall of Famer. Vlad Guerrero, I don't get how he doesn't make it. He
almost gets 71%. He'll probably make
but how does he almost – like you look at Vlad Guerrero in the lexicon of right fielders in Major League Baseball, and not only was he feared because you didn't know what he was going to swing at. This guy had the worst sense of the strike zone ever, but he hit everything. He hit him from his ankles. He hit him from – so you didn't know how to pitch to him, and he threw out everybody. Like you didn't run on Vlad Guerrero. And so I don't understand. And he did – when he fell off – he just fell off the earth, but that was fine. He was a great player for a long time.
The old joke about Vladimir Guerrero is the way to get him out is throw him right down the middle. But if you throw it in the ground, if you throw it 5 feet over his head, he'd hit it for a home run. Yeah. And to your point about to your point about Pudge Rodriguez and the physical stature, Bagwell had a shoulder injury late in his career, and when he came back, he looked like a second baseman. So there was a dramatic difference in his body.
But he never got caught, so
But
never implicated.
I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I was just going to say it's just nice to see Tim Raines in there, and I'm trying to think of, and I'm going through my mind are there any other Expos that should be in there?
Well, Guerrero probably will probably get in, but after that, Larry Walker is probably the only one.
Yeah.
Actually, I may have one more. Hold on.
Okay, I mean Larry Walker has maybe a decent chance. I heard him being talked about last night. One of the Toronto baseball writers was being interviewed on Toronto radio, and he was saying the problem with Walker is that he spent the first few years of his career in obscurity in Montreal, and then went to Colorado, where his numbers could be written off because of the conditions there. And
but you know what people overlook with Larry Walker? Again, not a baseball guy, but I certainly kept track of the few Canadians who had penetrated. Walker did something very cool that other guys started picking up on. And Russ, you could probably correct me on this if I'm wrong, but he was the guy who was catching these shallow fly balls that landed and then nailing guys at first base. He figured out that angle that I can shoot a cannon to first base, and these guys aren't running them out like they should. And he added a neat element of defense there that I found pretty fascinating for a guy who was primarily known as just a big hitter, at least in Colorado.
Yeah, the problem with Walker is playing in Colorado, he had just ridiculous numbers compared to what he did in Montreal because he was a gap hitter. The gaps in Colorado are massive because of the atmospheric change. He is getting sort of blackballed because of that. Because if he had stayed in Montreal, he would have been a borderline Hall of Famer. But his Colorado numbers make him a Hall of Famer, but they sort of make him a pseudo Hall of Famer. That's the problem.
Yeah, right. You know who's another one like that? And the last thing on this, a guy like Todd Helton, because he played almost his entire career in Colorado. I don't know what his career hit, so I think he was like 22 or 2,300. There's no chance of him making the Hall of Fame because he played his entire year in that bandbox in Colorado. So, yeah. Anyway, let's talk some hockey. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, January 19th, 2017.
I'm Pete Hesse, covering the Jets for HockeyBuzz.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, there's some games last night, some interesting games. The one that I think piqued my curiosity the most, Russ, was Detroit and Boston. Turn on that game, middle of the second period, I believe it was 4-1 Boston. Boston appeared to be dominating. Peter Mrazek could not stop a beach ball. Turned the game back with 5 minutes left to go in the third period. It was 5-4 Boston, and Detroit quickly tied it on a Nyquist goal and won it in a shootout. Detroit's having like a little mini streak here. I think they've won 3 games in a row. They're trying to climb back into the race in the Atlantic Division and in the Eastern Conference. But the team that I want to focus on, and I think everybody's starting to focus on, is Boston, because they're in second place in the Atlantic, but they've played, I think, 49 games now, 48 or 49 games. And so they've played 6 more than Toronto and Ottawa and a few other teams in the East. And now there's talk, because of the way that they're playing lately, that Claude Julien's job may be in jeopardy. What were your observations?
Here's what I'll say. I mean, quickly on the Detroit side, Mrazek is just too aggressive. He's a guy that not only leaves the blue paint, but he goes far out, and a lot of times doesn't need to go that far out. For every one great save that he makes that way, I think he leaves himself open for others. I thought Mantha really had another great game. Like, I'm glad to see him really starting to stick. You knew when there was things being said about him that I backed him 100%, and I'm happy to see him pulling through. Now, on the Bruins side, it's not Claude Julien's fault. It's really not. Claude Julien's a great coach. If they try to replace Claude Julien, they won't be able to now. If they feel like they don't listen to him anymore, that's fine. But you'll never get that same kind of coach in the next 5 years really anywhere. And that's not saying that Cassidy can't do that kind of job. I'm just saying Claude Julien has risen to the point where, he's probably one of the 6, 7 best coaches in the game, and I don't understand why it falls on him. They're bigger, they're older, they're slower. That's what the Bruins are. And I don't even blame Don Sweeney per se, because, look, I think they've been drafting well. I mean, look at all the defensemen that they've been able to infuse into their system and infuse into the lineup. Some are young, some are old, some are big, some are slow. You know, they signed Backus, same thing with him. He's a slower guy, but I get that they wanted some size down the middle. They just have a mix that's going to be really hard to figure out, and I don't think it's the coach that's the problem.
Yeah, Peter,
no, not at all. And the thing with Boston is simply that I think people, or it's easy to forget that just how much that team could ride on Chara and Bergeron being all-stars every single game, in and out. You take away Bergeron, who is injured. I know that from a hockey pool issue I have, and then the aging of Chara, and it's like it was bound to happen. And they're going through a bit of a recycle process. But remember when everyone freaked out about Dougie Hamilton getting traded, and how are they ever going to fill those shoes? They actually haven't done too badly.
No, it's true.
You know, they could be better with Dougie Hamilton, but they haven't done that poorly. They didn't fall off the map. No. And I think that, you know, for a lot of people, the sky was falling. Look, Claude Julien can come coach for my team any day. He's a coach. He's a good coach, and he's a motivator. I don't have a problem with Claude Julien, but these ideas that, you know, his job is in jeopardy right now and that it's coming from so many areas, someone in Boston's got to actually step up and just deal with that. That shouldn't be running around the team right now. That's a bigger issue. Even if it is, you got to quash that rumor and get rid of it.
I agree. I think that the fact that it's all over Twitter gives me more credence that it won't happen. But you're right. I think it does need to go away. And I think they just need to focus on maybe even calling up a player or two from Providence. I know that they're going to say, well, you know, nobody's like sort of ready, whatever. And, you know, Matt Grzelcyk comes to mind. He's a smaller defenseman, but again, like Torrey Krug, can really move the puck, can really shoot the puck. Mm-hmm. I say the same thing about the Rangers. This is the time of the year when teams are sagging a little bit that they really should be giving like tryouts to some of their guys in the AHL. Because, look, you could say what you want, even as a talent evaluator for a team, about what a guy looks like down in the AHL. But sometimes when they're around NHL players, they play a lot better. And that's something that's hard to figure out if you haven't really seen too much of that from any player. And so, you know, again, is Ryan Spooner playing great? No. And so I get that they haven't had a lot of help, but Pasternak is playing great. So for everyone that I tell you isn't, I'm telling you there's another one that does. And so that's why I think they need to go through like a trial and error process here. I think the press is being too short with them there. I think their expectations were too high to begin with, because I always looked at them as a bubble team this year anyhow. I think fans look at it like, hey, we're spending a lot of money on tickets, and they do. Ticket prices are high in Boston, so I understand that. But Peter's right. They're doing both. They're rebuilding, and they're trying to stay in it too.
Right, but the problem is that people see – I mean, you look at that team and you don't realize, at least some people don't, this is not 2011. There is no support structure. There is no Lucic anymore. There is no Seidenberg. There is no Nathan Horton. There is no Tim Thomas. Now, you have a good replacement. Tuukka Rask is – I don't think he's as good as Tim Thomas was at his peak, but he's pretty good. He's one of the best goalies in the league. He's an all-star. But then they replaced Hamilton's spot in terms of being a big, young, promising defenseman with Carlo. Carlo doesn't score as much as Hamilton did, but he's an adequate replacement, and they have young defensemen in the pipeline. But you look at the rest of their defense after Krug. I mean, Chara's closing in on 40. He's still got another year left in his contract. You've got, you know, the Millers. You've got John Michael Lyles. It's not a spectacular group. It's not like Adam McQuaid. It's not like you have Johnny Boychuk on your second pairing anymore. So the depth of that organization is gone, and the weight of responsibility right now is so much on Pasternak and Bergeron and Marchand and Krejci, and to a lesser extent, you know, guys like Bolesky and Backus. That team just simply is not as good as it was 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, they're not getting output from Jimmy Hayes. Jimmy Hayes is 3 points. I mean, go ahead, Peter.
You mean players who were in their prime 5 years ago aren't as good as they were when they're out of their prime? I mean, that's really kind of what it is. And frankly, I mean, Boston, they won the cup. They went back 2 years later to the final and lost to Chicago, right? Right, in 2013.
Yeah, 2013, yep.
2013. So they didn't do too badly there. Then and then they went on this weird decline. Yeah, compare them to the Canucks and the fiasco that happened from 2011 with Vancouver. Vancouver came back and won the President's Trophy in 2012, but they weren't the same team either. And if you look at the management things, in all fairness, well, Bruins fans may be up in arms. They've got nothing to complain about compared to what Canucks fans have gone through.
Well, the one thing that seems to be a common thread with the Bruins is, and I term it as a sort of an irrational need by the upper management of that franchise, is to move on from anything that was tainted with Peter Chiarelli's name. Anything that had anything to do with Chiarelli, they want to move on from. Any talk about moving certain players out that were Chiarelli players. They moved on from Lucic. They moved on from guys who maybe still had, were still usable and still had a purpose in Boston. They've decided, guys like Spooner are on the block. Spooner was a Chiarelli draft pick. They've seemed to want to move, the key guys, the guys that they can't get rid of because the team would be completely destroyed if they moved Bergeron or Marchand. They'll make exceptions for that, but anybody who they can move that's a Chiarelli player or a Chiarelli coach, they seem to want to move on from them.
Here's a crazy idea. I mean, they've got Peter Mueller in Providence. He only has 14 points in 26 games. He's not lighting it up, but he has 7 goals. He knows how to play in the NHL. He had injury problems. It's not like Riley Nash is ripping it up. I get he's a good penalty killer, but if you're looking for offense, maybe bring Peter Mueller up. He does have size, and he might reignite at the NHL level because they just don't have enough scoring. And maybe a guy like that needs to be called upon and just see what he's got.
Now, one of the other games last night was in Winnipeg, the return of Andres Pavelec to the NHL, a 6-3 victory for the Winnipeg Jets over the awesome Arizona Coyotes. Now, I saw a little bit of the early part of that game, Peter, and that first goal that Pavelec let in. I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to be 9-0, and then he sort of recovered and made a nice stick save on a one Arizona opportunity. But I mean, isn't this just the sign of ultimate desperation that they have to bring Pavelec back and give him another shot?
I've got about 3 things about this, and I just put a blog up, and and I talk a little bit about it in the blog. So I'll say this first. Number one, bringing Pavelec back was not about a solution. He's not the solution. He's not the answer. What this was about it was a pressure release valve on what was on Connor Hellebuck, who basically could turn into a diamond right now. He's got so much pressure on him. This kid needed to be taken out of the heat really fast. Something's not right with him right now, whether it's the workload, the grind of the pro game, something's not there. He needed to get out. This could simply be a between the ears thing, much like what we're seeing with Lundqvist right now, and even perhaps Carey Price. Like, he just needed to not have to answer the questions, not take the heat. Pavelec was never the solution. This is Paul Maurice's way of saying, okay, I've got to protect this kid now. Andre Pavelec has always been a lightning rod. He knows how to deal with this, right or wrong. Let's get him in here. Conversation gets out of Hellebuck. It goes to Pavelec. Okay, that's 1. 2, every Jets fan, all the media who covered the team knew there was going to be challenges this year. We were told it's going to be a young team. We were told there were going to be rookies, and there may have been more rookies starting in the lineup than they even planned. But there they were. We knew this was coming. We knew that there's no surprise about what this team was. That's 2. No one should be shocked about that. What no one really figured out was the problem that has sunk the Jets is not where they thought the problem was going to be. They thought the problem was going to be rookies and youth learning the game and doing everything. Well, the Jets can score goals. They actually are a good possession team at even strength. This is where they thought they'd have problems. Where they had problems is the penalty kill is a calamity, and they don't have goaltending. So what's your best penalty killer? Your goalie. So when you add those things together, the problems have shown up not where they thought they'd be. They actually believed in Connor Hellebuck. And Russ, you've seen him for years. You know this. He's a good goalie. He's shown good situations. This, in their mind, this part of the plan wasn't going to happen, or this failure wasn't going to happen. So there is no backup plan.
No, there's none. I mean,
and so now you've got a problem that you didn't expect, didn't plan for, and it's not easy to get out, particularly when you've already buried $4.8 million in the AHL, right? Like, this isn't a team with the budget that's going to say, you know what, maybe we'll get Halak right now and bring in that guy to help support Hellebuck. No, they're not going to do it unless you can get rid of something else. And that's probably not going to happen either. So that's where the things have gone wrong. You know, the team's played well enough to be a decent team, but if you look at all the numbers, advanced, traditional, they're getting sunk by the penalty kill and they're getting sunk by the goaltending.
What I would say about the penalty kill is, like, Wheeler in his day was always a good penalty killer. Little used to be, and I don't know if he's not now, what happened there. Trouba should be a good penalty killer. He's done penalty kills his whole career, even though he's a young player. But I guess they don't have a second-tier penalty kill, and that's probably what kills them, is when those guys are out on the ice. I mean, look, probably the most underrated player in the NHL right now is Nick Ehlers with 40 points in 48 games. Like, nobody talks about him, and he's definitely a superstar in the making. Like, there's no question in my mind. But no one talks about him. They all talk about Scheifele and
talk about Laine.
Yeah, and they talk about Laine. Probably the biggest disappointment is still Dustin Byfuglien because, you know, I watched him the other night. He's just not right. He's not taking over games. He's not making people pay in the corners. He's not scoring enough. Yeah,
it's hit and miss with Buff right now. It's very hit and miss, and it's hard to know. I mean, the other thing too is you know, the third pairing of the Jets, the Sherratt and Postma one is an abysmal situation too. You know, where the fans are going with this, and right or wrong, is they're going back to systems, and they're going back to say, why did Maurice choose his own coaches? Why haven't we brought in someone who can fix the special teams? Because the power play is not much better. And deal with these issues once and for all, because they're not there. And essentially, you're starting to get the same kind of upswelling of frustration, because the team looks, on most nights right now, looks a lot like the old Claude Noel Jets, which was an undisciplined, chaotic environment of run and gun and God knows what else kind of hockey that never seemed to get anywhere. And that's what fans are seeing now. But what they're sort of missing in the noise is that, well, Ehlers for one, and they're also missing the fact that the team, while not truly exciting, it's not a bad goal scoring team. It's limiting chances at even strength. It's just not doing a lot in the offensive zone when it gets its chances, and hence when you start giving them up, you got nothing to stop it. It's just they need something, and that's why Pavlik's here. Let's distract him. Like, he's not coming back next year. You know what? Essentially, he's a sacrificial lamb, is what he is right now, and that's okay. I'm sure he'd rather be a sacrificial lamb in the NHL than riding the bus in the AHL, and good for him.
But they have assets. They could definitely trade for a penalty killer. They could have picked up Dominic Moore for nothing, the same way Boston did. And he's a guaranteed penalty killer. He's lost a little speed, but he's still great at that. Like, there's definitely guys you could get as penalty killers that are not going to cost you a ton of assets. I don't know why they haven't done that. If that's their biggest problem, and I didn't know that because I don't watch them enough, I don't know why they haven't done that yet.
Well, I mean,
go ahead. I was just going to say, I think it's got to do with some roster size and contracts, and they'd rather have the kids learning that. But here's the other thing, though, too. I mean, Tyler Myers isn't there. He's an adequate penalty killer. I mean, he's basically in the witness protection program now. No one knows anything about him. Like everyone thought he would have been back by now. It's just poof, gone. Here's the other thing that someone brought up today, and it might have been on TSN radio here. Who do the Jets call up if they have another defense injury? Well, there's a long, lanky kid who's like Meyer's twin called Julian Melchiori. After that, you know who the best option is? Mark Strait. That's how thin the defense is.
You mean Brian Strait?
Brian Strait. That's what I meant. Brian Strait. I get the two confused all the time. That's how bad it is to call up.
Maybe they can trade for Adam Party again, you know?
Yeah, and Melchiori
There's a reason
really
Adam Party
rangy.
is in Winnipeg. I'll
Like
tell you.
Melchiori, I'm not in love with his game.
No. He's a career bubble guy for call-ups, and that's what he's going to be. So that's the problem with the Jets. And you know what? Everyone's all chuffed. Oh, they came in, they scored 6 goals. It was on Arizona. You should have scored 6 goals last week when you only scored 3. So, give yourselves a reality check, folks. This is a team that's struggling.
Well, Russ, we talked before the show about, the common thread that's going around throughout the league. I mean, if you look at some of these teams that are in panic mode right now, we see Dallas and the Rangers go 7-6. We see a 6-5 game last night between Boston and Detroit. We see 8-7 between two of the best teams, Pittsburgh and Washington. The common thread here is, and I didn't watch all of the Boston Detroit, but the other two were pretty sloppy games, and teams, once they got up and got a lead, they couldn't shut things down. And you had a discussion with a friend of yours about what's going on in the league right now, and I think it's on target. There is
basically nobody can defend anymore. Like it is run and gun, and nobody can lock it down. And the problem is that when you have a lot of goalies that are used to read and react, like Lundqvist, who's admitted that's the kind of goalie he is, and I think to some degree Tuukka Rask is. I noticed the same things happened to Tuukka Rask yesterday that happened to Lundqvist against Dallas, and that's when you don't know what your defense is going to do in front of you, and you're getting an odd man rush, you end up giving up 5 whole goals, because there's a little bit of uncertainty there. And I saw that happening to Rask, and that's really not his normal way of giving up goals, or at least what I always perceive Rask as a weak area. But I noticed now with Lundqvist and him, and they're similar goalies, that this is a problem because they can't depend on what's happening on the ice anymore. So now it's become harder to read the play. And something I noticed with the Rangers in particular, because they're one of the few teams that still relies on block shots. When you have a rookie like Brady Shea, who's got all this physical prowess and great skating ability, dropping down to block shots as a first thought, like that's his first thought, let me drop down and block a shot. A, sometimes you screen your goalie, but B, because teams are so fast now, guys are going around you, and you can't get up in time to help your goalie. And if you do, sometimes it's hitting off your stick or something. It's just becoming a bad thing for a goalie. How about not trying to go down and block every shot anymore? That's the thing. It's hard to catch these guys. I get it, but there's still stick work and angles that you can do. And everybody is so hell-bent on getting into the offensive zone that when everybody's in the offensive zone, deep in the zone, and you get one defenseman there, it's hard to get back on defense.
Yeah, right now, a lot of the teams are going – the trend over the last couple of years is away from the bigger – the shot blocker type of defenseman to the puck carrier, to the guy. Size doesn't matter anymore. It's, let's get a guy who can fly, who can carry the puck, who can get it out of the offensive zone and turn the attack around. But the problem is when it comes back into your zone, a guy, and I'll use the Leafs as an example. You've got Connor Carrick, who is a really good skater, can carry the puck. He's paired with Jake Gardner. Now, Jake Gardner, they're not paired against top lines because, Gardner is still a defensive liability against a top offensive line, but he can carry the puck. But the problem is they turn over the puck, or the puck is in their zone. They're not big enough. They're not strong enough to knock the other team off of the puck. So you've got defensemen who are one-dimensional. And I think a lot of these defensemen are becoming more and more one-dimensional. If you can skate, if you can carry the puck, if you can, play the game offensively, great. But the problem is you have to play in the other end of the ice, and those two-way defensemen, they're disappearing.
How many teams? And Peter, you could answer this too. How many teams have 4 good defensemen anymore? Two-way defensemen.
Maybe 12, 13.
I don't even know if it's that high. It might be lower than that. Yeah, but that's the maximum. I would say that's the maximum.
Yeah, they're just harder to find, and Frankly, I wonder, it's interesting when we talk, and I speak for Canada because there's always controversy about what level or quality of players being developed here. But one of the things I think is systems hockey just goes so far down the pipe in Canada. I mean, it gets down to like pre-bantam. Like it's, if you're a AA player before bantam, you're learning systems right away. It's less on skill development, individual stuff. And I'm wondering if that's having effect, particularly in the defensive side of the game, where you're not bringing up guys who are so individually skilled. You're just having less enter the draft or draft eligible each year who teams think of as decent prospects. And there's just not as many.
I will tell you this. I had a conversation with a writer at the World Juniors, and the conversation was about Thomas Chabot, and this other writer felt like, yeah, I think he could be a real big star someday, but he's not wowing me, in this tournament like other people have. And I think what you're saying is a symptom of that. But I got to tell you, I think Thomas Chabot will be a big star defenseman in the NHL. I think the problem is until you get to the NHL, you sometimes are hampered by what you're allowed to do by your coach to show off those abilities. But once you get to the NHL, then those coaches want to let you run free. And so, Chabot certainly does do that in junior, but he didn't get to do it even enough and still got voted best defenseman in the World Juniors. So I think those guys are out there, but I think they're just like you said, I think it's fair to say they're a little less exciting because they know that to get drafted and to get to the NHL, they can't really be too much in a gambling mode. And that's, and that does take away a little bit from that.
Well, you got to remember, there's a lot of teams and coaches who would never, ever have the tolerance for a riverboat gambler like a Bufflin. Right? I mean, that kind of stuff gets weeded out so fast because that'll not only will get you fired, it'll get you kicked out off the team. You won't go anywhere because no one's got the time for it.
To me, this is a big reason why Cale Clegg was so relied upon from Team Canada, because he doesn't wow you, but he doesn't make mistakes. And if you've got a guy that doesn't make mistakes, hey, let's put him on our top pairing because we don't have to worry about him. And he is really good. He's a good puck mover. I don't think he'll be a star in the NHL. I think he'd be a really good defenseman. But nowadays, there are coaches that would rather have that really good defenseman than have that star that does take chances, like a Shane Gostisbehere, and have to sort of manage that. Well, I agree with that.
Well, Peter, that was the story back in the day with Sergei Gonchar in Washington and Pittsburgh, and and with Phil Housley back in his days with Buffalo, or even Mike Green with the Caps. I mean, they're not defensemen. They're rovers. They jump into the attack. They're only late in his career did Housley actually, when he played after he got traded from Buffalo to Winnipeg, he actually started to be more of a reliable defenseman in his own zone. He used his offensive ability as a defensive weapon, because if you have the puck, you're not going to give it up, you're more dangerous offensively by not having it and not defending in your own zone. But the thing is, you look at the landscape right now when it comes to the NHL, and the teams that I would say are in fantastic position in the next 3 or 4 years are the teams that have stockpiled blue liners. Philadelphia, Anaheim, Minnesota's got a lot of defensemen. Even the Bruins have defensemen in the pipeline.
Technically Florida does. It's just how they mesh together, but they do.
I would rather be those teams than obviously the Leafs have a lot of positives right now with Marner and Matthews and the young guys that they have. But where is their organization lacking depth? Other than the guys they have in the NHL, they don't have a lot of centers in their organization. They have most of their prospects are on the wing, and they have 1 or 2 defensive prospects. They have not drafted a first-round defenseman since Morgan Riley. So for that team to get from a team that barely gets in the playoffs to a team that's a Stanley Cup contender, they need 2 or 3 defensemen. That's where I think Winnipeg has an advantage, because Myers is under contract. Bufflin is, he may starting to be going down in the end toward the bottom part of his career, but he's still good. And Trouba, that's a piece right there that if they can keep him, which I don't think they're going to, or at least turn him into a future defenseman, and they've got pieces there, but you can't win without defense.
No. I do want to make an announcement. We have a big guest coming on Monday.
Okay.
And it's a shame X not here to hear it, but he will be very excited on Monday. The referee from Puppy Bowl, Dan the Ref, will be on the show at 1:15.
God.
Oh my God! Really? That's the big guest.
That is a big. Are you kidding? You have any idea how many people watch Puppy Bowl? Any idea?
We don't get it up here in Canada.
Is that sponsored by Puppy Chow?
Listen, say what you want. You could just leave the room, Mike. We'll take care of it.
Okay.
There may or may not be puppies there too. We'll see. We're getting the lay of the land here. But I did want to make that announcement. Now, the NHL did make an announcement. I'd say we got on our phones maybe like an hour and a half ago about Jonathan Huberdeau and Barkov maybe being out for the season.
Really?
Yes.
I did not. I mean, I was doing some prep for the show. I didn't see that. Well, I mean, I know that Huberdeau was skating. I mean, I know that they
I'll read it to you. Hold on.
Okay. Well, why? I mean, while you're looking that up, I mean, the other thing that I had was the news, and this. I mean, I'm sure the NHL knew that this was coming down the pike because it's been rumored for a while, but I think they wanted the excitement of the Las Vegas franchise to maintain a certain level for a while, but it came out from the NFL today that the Raiders have filed paperwork to move to Vegas. Now, Las Vegas will, that team will debut in October of this year, but the NFL season starts in September. So you could have, and if I don't know the stadium situation, if there's a stadium ready for the Raiders to move in there, or whether they're gonna have to play someplace else while a stadium is being built. But that's sort of gonna take away the excitement in a sense.
All right, here's the report. It's from a reporter, Elaine Poupart, and it's on NHL.com.
Okay.
It says Panthers top forwards could miss rest of the season. Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau recovering from injuries, but might not return until 2017-2018.
Wow.
Whoa.
I mean, Huberdeau was supposed to be. I mean, it was an Achilles injury, right? I mean,
yes.
Yeah. So
that's a big deal, as we know.
I mean, we know that. Erik Karlsson came back from it in season after, which was shocking in terms of his recovery time. But not everybody recovers at the same speed. But
Barkov is upper body. I don't know what that means. I don't know what Barkov's injury is. I don't.
They've kept that close to. I mean,
and there's no timetable for return for him, like none.
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
That completely derails. I mean, the Panthers.
This could kill their season. Not that it was getting better, but it was getting a little better.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, they get Bukestad back, but Huberdeau and Barkov are 2/3 of their top line. I mean, that's really tough. If they can rely on Luongo to win some games for them, but they need offense, and your number one center probably is Trocheck then if Barkov is out. So and Trocheck's having a pretty good year. So, but yeah, that's a big. I mean, look at the Atlantic Division. I mean, Eichel was out for the first 6 weeks. That was a big hit for Buffalo. Their season really hasn't gotten on track since. Tampa Bay loses Stamkos for probably the year. Bishop for a good chunk of time. They're just starting to pull out of it. Now, if this is true and Barkov and Huberdeau are out, that's a big thing. I mean, teams in the Atlantic are really getting hit hard with injuries.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, we've all been waiting on Huberdeau, and now that March timetable doesn't seem realistic anymore. And boy, these are two top line guys. Like, this is like tell any team 2/3 of your top line may not be back till next year, and that's devastating. And the thing is, they already had to go through the transition with Tom Rowe taking over. That's gone okay. They're a fringe team already to make the playoffs. Doesn't look good. Like they're probably. No. They're probably going to be sellers.
I wonder if their computer modeling predicted these injuries.
No, stop. I think they're going to be sellers. But the thing is, this is something where, like, ownership now maybe will understand when they said a year ago that they expect to win the Stanley Cup in 3 years, why this doesn't happen to teams. And this is the reason why. Injuries, up and down play from players, everything's got to hit right for you to win the Stanley Cup. But mainly you've got to be pretty injury-free, or you've got to get your guys back late in the season.
It's really weird, Peter, because the two teams, if you looked at their trajectory at the last season that you could be encouraged about, were the Islanders and the Panthers, the teams that met each other in the first round of the playoffs. And this year has been so dramatic. The summer and the beginning of the regular season has been so bad for both of those teams. The Panthers we just talked about, the Islanders right now with now firing Capuano, with losing Opposo and Nielsen to free agency and replacing them with Andrew Ladd, who you know very well. I remember pretty distinctly when we were talking last year that you saw this sort of coming, because there were signs there of Ladd sort of dropping off, and so right now, I'm looking at X column that he's saying that there's the possibility of not a wholesale cleaning on the island, but that some dramatic changes. Guys like Hamonic, who have been rumored to be traded. Cal Clutterbuck, who they just signed to an extension, possibly being moved. To me, the entire story with the Islanders is Tavares. I'm focused completely on that. And
I think if they want to keep Tavares, they should be thinking about moving Clutterbuck. But the thing is, and it's not like he's the greatest player, but he is a glue kind of player, and he has become an important guy in that locker room. I think the issue is if we go with the premise that they've been evaluating, and that's why they pulled Capuano when they did, even though he shut out the Bruins. Like, it was the first time the Islanders shut out the Bruins in forever, and then he gets pulled, right? If we believe in that, then we have to believe that they've been evaluating players all along, but they're still going to have to give a little bit of time for Waite to evaluate them before anything like this happens. And so I'm not willing to give in to any of this yet until I see how they play for Doug Waite, and he's probably going to give him at least 10 games.
Well, that was the weird. Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
No, I agree with that. I was just sort of saying, I think that's what they're going to do. I mean, I guess if there's another firing, then Garth Snow's got to think, how long do I have to wait? Like, how long do I have? If my guy's out there, and if it's not wait, if my solution's out there, do I have to be urgent right now? And if there's another firing or something else happens, he may then have to say, I've got to be a little more aggressive about this, so I get the guy I want, as opposed to taking the secondary pick if I don't have the option.
Garth Snow was about as forthcoming in an interview last night on NBCSN as Bill Clinton during a deposition. It was that bad. He would not answer any question about like the future of Waite, whether he's going to be there for the rest of the year. So he's keeping his options open. And I can only surmise from that, because if a coach comes out on the market that he might be, he might jump at the opportunity, say if Julian gets fired in Boston. But I'm still wondering, I know Garth is saying, I'm not worried about my status. He should be, because honestly, they're looking for a team president. And a team president's going to want to hire his own GM, and is going to want to hire his own coach. So I don't think ownership and Garth are sort of on the same page.
Well, unless, see, the one thing we don't know, and with Waite getting inserted, we have to think that there's a possibility that when they bring in this other person, that maybe Snow stays with the team but goes to a different position with the team. That is a possibility.
You mean him moving up to president and then?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's possible. I mean, I just know from experience and seeing it firsthand when it came to the Leafs, Brendan Shanahan comes in as team president. He assumes he takes over with Carlisle and with Nonis as the GM. And within a year, both were gone.
Right. Here's the worry. I'll give you both sides, because, look, I was in the corporate world for a little while. Here's the worry. Garth Snow has been in charge for so long that if you bring in a guy that's not that familiar with the team, it will probably take 6 months to a year just to get familiar with the team. So I'm not sure they're going to be able to push Garth out quickly and be able to have a draft and be able to group everything together and call it a successful transition. So he probably will get another year or more with the team if they really want to do it slowly and methodically. And so far, that's how it's gone, is slowly and methodically.
So that's a good point, Russ. And I wonder too, like going back to the early point about what if Garth Snow got moved up the ladder? Maybe, you know, he's got a good relationship with ownership. He's been there. Maybe they're agreeing to say, look, I've done as much as I possibly can do in this role. I want to stay with the organization. I'm a big believer that every organization needs a president, like particularly doing what Shanahan's doing, and that's protecting ownership from itself. You need someone there who everyone else has to answer to, so that they're looking out for ownership, and that's what, you know, the Jets don't have that. You know who the president is in Winnipeg? Kevin Cheveldayoff. And who does he answer to? The owner. So so that's what Shanahan's there for. He's there to hold everyone else's feet below the fire, to look out for his ownership group. Snow would probably be okay at that, and he'd have a bit of a role in choosing his successor.
Right.
And if he blows that up, well, that's a different story. But it might not be a bad move, and would allow the slow process to happen, or at least contingency, because any work he's done for coming up to the draft and stuff like that is still going to have his fingerprints on it. He can be there, part of it, and bring that person in at the right time, and then pull back after even that happens, the draft and free agency period, and say, okay, here's where we are, here's what we have. I'm here to support you. We'll get through this together on this plan, or wherever it is. What do you want to tweak? And then he can sort of pull himself away. And he's got that separation, and he's got a new sort of architect at that level down to grow the team where it needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, GMs don't pick at the draft, right? They look at their directors of amateur scouting. They all talk to the scouts at the table. They sometimes will have an idea of who they like, and then we'll make a final decision based on what the guys are telling them. But yeah, if you bring in a new guy to that, and let's say Garth is completely gone, then that new guy has to rely on scouts he doesn't really know and go by their reputations. And so that's where it gets a little tricky. I do want to say one thing that Mike and I talked about off air that I forgot to mention about Boston, just quickly going back. There's a lot of whining still about Chiarelli and the draft. Peter Chiarelli did not make those selections. He didn't scout all those players. Some of those scouts are still there. Directors of amateur scouting. There's a lot of blame to place with those things. Stop blaming Peter Chiarelli years later. Like, this is just like a whining cry that I see on Twitter, and it's ridiculous.
Fair point.
Yeah, I mean, no, one rumor that has started to pop up from, and based on where this team is in the standings, it's understandable that it would pop up, is the availability of Kevin Shattenkirk. The Blues are third place in the Central right now, Peter, and they're not playing as well as I think they expected. Their goaltending is mediocre at best. Jake Allen really hasn't taken the ball and run with it. Right now, Carter Hutton has been playing more than I think Doug Armstrong wanted Carter or expected Carter Hutton to play. They've had some injury problems. Other than Vlad Tarasenko, who's got over 20 goals, nobody else is even close to 20. I mean, they're getting some offense out of guys like Schwartz. But they're not getting as much, and Fabry, but they're not getting as much offense as they did last year. And their defense is really solid. And the situation with that team right now is, they're not going to re-sign Shattenkirk. They've got Parayko as an expiring contract, his entry-level deal. They're probably going to sign him to a long-term extension. So if they're not a realistic contender, then it would make sense that they would start looking around to see what they could get for Shattenkirk. The question I have is, what can they get for Shattenkirk? Where are we talking? Are we talking prospect first round pick and a player? Are we? That's the usual. For a high level rental. What do you think St. Louis can get for Shattenkirk?
Wow, he's a UFA this year.
Yep.
So it's going to start with a first rounder if you want to pick. But if you don't want to pick, that really changes things, because if you're taking, are you taking back some bad money with a good player, long term or short term? You know, if Shattenkirk's simply a rental, that's the other thing too, right? Like, is he a rental? Is he going to sign? I mean, this is the evaluation process we go through every year, right? There's always one or two guys out there. Last year it was Andrew Ladd, you know, big name, UFA to B. What's his value? What's the market going to do? It's interesting because you don't often see someone like him come about, right? Like, it's a little rare, or it's a rarity. You know, predicting the trade market, because I'm always wildly wrong. Like, just, I mean, way off the mark. But I would think you can get a fairly decent handful of players, and probably, you know, a prospect player, probably along the lines of what Kevin Cheveldayoff got for Andrew Ladd. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a first, a prospect, and another pick as well, you know, and a player coming back.
Russ, I would find it hard to believe that Shattenkirk goes anywhere other than for being a rental. I think he's going July 1 because he can get 7 years, and
he's going to get the most money on the free agent market.
Yeah. So unless the team that he is traded to gives him the type of deal that he thinks he's going to get in free agency, you know.
Yeah, I think he's going to wait anyhow. Like, he's going to wait.
Right.
He is a complete rental, the same way Yandel was. And I think for Shattenkirk, like Yandel, obviously the Rangers gave away way too much. But I think for Shattenkirk, you'll still get a first rounder and a team's like second or third best prospect.
Okay. I mean, it all depends. Like, if he's being traded to a contender, and I know one of the names that has been out there has been Montreal, because Montreal is looking for a little bolstering on defense. But the thing is, I think they have 3 right-hand shots right now as it is. So I don't know if the need is that great for Shattenkirk, but you know, a team like that would be willing to trade a first-round pick because the first-round pick is going to be low.
But I think the problem is, with Hitchcock not being decided on his goaltending, he is going to probably tell Armstrong not to touch anything on defense because he's worried about his goaltending. He doesn't even know who his number 1 goalie is now. And if they're not going to use Jordan Binnington, well, he doesn't.
Well, no. I was going to say right now. I mean, see, that's the thing. Right now, I mean, we are 6 weeks away from the trade deadline. There is so much jockeying a position that's going to happen in the next 5 or 6 weeks that, you know, I just wrote something for our Rumor Buzz column about, like, something that Pierre LeBrun wrote on ESPN. They're on their site about 3 guys, one of them being Shattenkirk, another one being Vanek, another one being Patrick Sharp. All the availability of all 3 of those players depends on where Detroit, Dallas, and St. Louis is going to be on March 1. If they are making a run, or if they think they're going to be good, then they're probably not going to move them.
Nope, that's fair. The NHL just put out what's happening at the All-Star game. Do we go over it today, or you want to do it tomorrow?
I'll save it for tomorrow.
Okay. It's a long list.
That'll take the depression of the inauguration away from us. Russ, you wanted to mention something at the end of the show?
Yes. On Twitter, there's a great follow, New York Hockey Chick. Although if you know, like, that's basically her handle, but it does say at Hockey Wench New York is the other way to sort of search her, and NYC rather. It's both NYC, Hockey Chick New York, NYC. But basically, she's a part of an event, and of course it jumped off my screen now. Let me find it again. Where'd it go? Hold on. That's the problem when I answer email.
While you're looking that up, I'll just mention that because it's curious. Seth Griffith has tied Reed Boucher for the most waivers. Seth Griffith was waived by Boston, claimed by Toronto, was waived by Toronto and claimed by Florida, and today he was waived by Florida. So where will Seth Griffith go?
Who knows?
All right.
So I have it. It's called Hockey Fights Hate, and it's going to be on Sunday, January 29th at 5:30 at Chelsea Piers in New York. And if people don't realize it. There's an actual functioning rink in New York. It's fantastic. Guys like Tim Robbins still play pickup hockey there, and I've been there. I interviewed Alan Thicke there in a celebrity game. It's just there's a lot of activity at that rink. I played there, and so basically there's people skating in this event. It says each registered skater will receive a practice style jersey printed with the logo. I hear that they're pretty close to being full with the skaters, but there's a way to go and watch, and you could also give to the event. You could donate. And so I would say check out on Twitter, again, Hockey Chick NYC. And if not, there are a couple of handles here. There's facebook.com/HockeyByTate, and Twitter, it's #HockeyByTate. So you could find out that way. You can give to the event. You can go. There's a post-skate beer and soft drinks that'll be provided for people that are playing. Like, again, I hear they're getting close to being full, but I don't know how full. But the Hockey by Tate is in partnership with New York City Gay Hockey Association, and they'll be holding a hockey scrimmage to, raise funds for the national chapter. So they're looking to hit a certain number. Maybe we could help them hit that number.
That would be great. All right, guys, great show. Thank you, Peter, for coming in. We will be back tomorrow. I'm not sure what time, because I think X said something about wanting to do it after the inaugural events in Washington. So maybe we can do a post inauguration buzzcast. So we will let you know. But for Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.